Downtown is typically the center point of any city, where there's non-stop action and plenty of energy. But inside the walls of this building, well, let's just say things were a little different.
I always thought the irony of the subsurface library was that it was in a basement. That's why I thought it was, when I was younger, I thought that's why it was called the subsurface library.
That's right, the subsurface library, formerly located in the basement of the Western United Life building. It was a place where independent oil and gas pioneers became more than just business associates. They became family.
You know, and everybody's like family to me. You know, all these guys, you know, they're just like my dads, my grandpas, my brothers.
Memories of the subsurface library live on through the stories of those who share its beginnings and the people who have made connections along the way. But soon those memories will be all that's left. The Western United Life building is scheduled for demolition. Downtown Midland is growing and changing. Centennial Park is bringing people together.
In just a few weeks, West Texans will be able to enjoy Centennial Park's 4 acres.
But there's still work to be done. The Western United Life building, it's been closed since 1996 and has been deteriorating ever since. The present-day appearance, with broken windows and chipped paint, are no indication of what once happened behind these old beige bricks. The building brought people together, and those people helped shape a thriving oil and gas industry, a city, even a nation. The life it lived created family. For those who have never stepped foot in Midland, the city is known for a few things, being a main hub for oil and gas, and also the sheer height of the buildings in the downtown area. These buildings earned Midland the nickname of the Tall City.
And Midland was originally called the Tall City because the building next door, which was originally called the Hogan Building, then it became the Shell Building. Now it's the Petroleum Building. It was built in 1927, and it was the tallest building between Fort Worth and El Paso.
It's the Tall City because if you get 100 miles, get 50 miles out there on the interstate coming this way, you can see Midland. You can see the buildings, you know.
And so Midland became the Tall City.
Despite the nickname, however, the Western United Life building is being demolished, making the Tall City have one less tall building. But it's not the first. Several others have come down in recent years. The first building in Midland to get knocked down was all the way back in 1972, when the famous Scarborough Hotel hit the dust. The next was in 2008, when the Midland Savings Building couldn't be saved. Finally, the most recent one was in 2019, when the building of the Southwest went south. The Western United Life building has been standing since 1948, but has been vacant for several decades, being an abandoned building in downtown Midland since 1996.
We just signed a 1-year lease, and then the next month the owner decided he's going to close, and he gave everybody 30 days notice.
The building had original plans of becoming hotel fuel.
I thought for a while they were going to turn it into some kind of a hotel. Rumor had it, but that never happened.
After several attempts to bring the building back to life, it's left with broken windows and graffiti. The biggest news coming from this building recently was a tragedy.
Well, the building's been empty for a long time. High school kids got in there and went rampaging around in the dark, and one fell down an elevator shaft and was killed. He was my daughter he was one of her students. She was devastated.
August 2017 would be the last time anyone would see 16-year-old John Butler smile, a Midland High student who left Earth too soon.
The memorial grows, balloons with notes of John Boy with a heart. Gonna miss you, bud. Once a teammate, always a teammate. Left outside the abandoned building where 16-year-old John Butler accidentally fell and died over the weekend.
I just asked the teenagers to stay out of these buildings. They're not safe. And it's sad.
Considered dangerous now after being vacant for so long, the time has come for the building to finally come down.
It's the Western United Life building. It's this building you see right here behind me with the windows busted out of it. Well, it has been up for decades, and soon it will be one of the 4 buildings on this lot that are set to be demolished as early as January 2023. A big decision that the Midland Development Corporation is moving forward with today.
My board and city council decided that the time has come to take it out and create a blank slate for redevelopment that better fits downtown as it is today.
The Western United Life building is coming to an end, but that doesn't mean it didn't contribute to the namesake of the tall city. Standing at 300 West Texas Avenue, it was first named the McClintock Building for the brothers, pioneer Midland ranchers Henry and Charles McClintock, who owned the land. The McClintock brothers, which was also their business name, were sons of former Confederate Sergeant George McClintock, a dry goods merchant from Virginia. If you opened a Midland newspaper in the early days, you'll more than likely see the McClintock name. George was especially a big deal in ranching and real estate, and both he and his family were Midland pioneers. When George died in 1926 from pneumonia, his $200,000 estate was given to Harry and Charles, and shortly after, Charles announced their plan for their building on a plot of land they owned in downtown Midland, what became to be known as the McClintock Building. Despite planning the building in 1926, it wasn't officially announced until August of 1947, and the first 6 floors were built in 1948. It was seen as becoming one of the most efficient modern office buildings in the Southwest. By 1949, the McClintock Building was Midland's largest building from a space standpoint, being a 101 by 140 feet structure with 225,000 square feet of rentable space. Some space the McClintock brothers rented themselves as they shared room 108. The 7th through the 12th floors, along with a 2-story penthouse, were added in 1951. This made it a 14-story building, concluding the construction. The building changed its name to the Petroleum Life Building in 1954, and in 1957, the current name it is now, the Western United Life Building. With Midland becoming a major petroleum center in the 50s and 60s, more and more oil companies needed offices. By 1950, 215 oil companies had offices in Midland. Due to the multitude of space, the McClintock Building housed several of those companies. There's stories upon stories in this building, no pun intended, from a roof fire to a potential movie being produced in the building that never happened. Let's just say Western United Life was definitely lively. Among the hundreds of people who worked in this building, a familiar face, not just in West Texas history, but American history as well, held an office in this building. In 1952, in room 732, George H.W. Bush was president of the Bush Overby Oil Development Company, with John Overby as his vice president. He wasn't the only George Bush who poked his head there, though. His son, George W., also made appearances in this building every so often, as Arbusto Energy, which turned to Bush Exploration, held an office in the Petroleum Building across the street around the late 70s and early 80s. Both of these famous presidents had their starts in the buildings a lot of Midlanders pass by every day.
And I was friends with George W. And one funny thing is, went down to Austin one time to take my mother out, and there's a place out there at Lake Travis called the Oasis, which is a beautiful place with all these decks on the cliff, you know, and they don't take reservations. So I take my mother out on a Sunday. The place is packed. It's going to be a long wait. And we start to leave, and somebody runs up and grabs me. Come on, sit with us. Well, it was George and Laura, and then Don and Susie Evans. And George says, come on, sit with us. So we did, and my mom, she was happy about it. And then some years later, she was saying how, because she grew up working in a factory in New York, that she didn't have any use for any Republicans. And I said, well, I thought you did that. How about that friend of mine down in Austin? She goes, oh, yeah, he was a very, very nice man. I said, well, Mom, that was George Bush. She goes, I sat with a guy who became president. I said, yes. She goes, I didn't know that.
My dad was drooling with it. My dad always put prospects together, and when he sold the prospect to an operating company, he always wanted to oversee the mud logging and the well site work. And so I would go out to the field with him. We could date it, but I was probably about 13 or 14. And my dad is sitting there in front of the microscope, keeps looking at samples, and this young oil man is pacing the floor of the mud logging trailer, and he's saying, "Mr. Grace, are we there? Mr. Grace, what are you seeing?" And he said, "Son, go sit down over there, and when I see something, I'll let you know." And I said, back then, that man called my dad Mr. Grace, and I said, today we call him Mr. President. You know, it was young George Bush. That was his first well he had ever drilled. I found the paperwork in my dad's office after he died, and I found the prospect, the deal, and it's signed George W. Bush, President of George W. Bush Operating. And it doesn't look anything like his signature today. You know, he went to signature school.
That's where he nicknamed me Dirty Dave. Yeah. He'd try to come in there and push me around, and I'd elbow him. And so when we went to the White House, when we went to the Oval Office to visit W, came in with the entourage, and I'm leading the pack, and he says, "Dirty Dave, how you doing?" I said, "Mr. President, they don't know me by that. Please don't."
At that time, like a lot of other small companies or independents, you know, you'd come down and occasionally, and you'd see him in there doing his own work. You know, knew who his daddy was, obviously, but had no idea what future lay in store for him. But at that time, he was just another client.
Another client who made it. It goes to show that you never know who's going to make it. Some guy you walk past downtown Midland could be president one day.
He was just a guy.
One of the most interesting aspects of the Western United Life building wasn't on the floors above the ground, it was below.
My father, Dick Russolo, and his partner Kingdon Hughes started Subsurface Library.
In the basement of the building was the Subsurface Library, one of the reasons W visited the Western United Life building.
I always thought the irony of the Subsurface Library was that it was in a basement. That's why I thought it was, when I was younger, I thought that's why it was called the Subsurface Library. But I don't even know if King planned that when they...
I think he did.
I think knowing King, he probably did.
This underground library wasn't your traditional library.
It's an information center for us guys in the oil business to create prospects. And when we need information that's available in log libraries, that's where we got the information on the scout tickets and the maps, and all the information we could need would be found in here, where we could look up Railroad Commission records and identify what we were looking at and find out, you know, who owns the leases, who owns the minerals.
It's a repository of information. We can't look around here, see all the files? We can't keep all that in our offices. There has to be a place that keeps it, where we can go retrieve it, where we can use that information. And you need places like this. This is huge in here.
Well, I know a lot of information was rescued from that, was being thrown to the dump, you know, that absolutely irreplaceable logs and comments and sample logs, and it would have been lost forever if it weren't for Subsurface Library.
Back in the day, there was no online resource for data, and so every geologist and sometimes engineers and a lot of times landmen, they were packed into the Subsurface Library because it was the only place you could get your data.
The subsurface is a very unique asset. No matter how everybody does oil and gas maps on computers, there's always data here that will benefit or kill a prospect. It's a very, very unique asset here at the library.
One thing I would say about the Midland libraries, we have the best collection of oil and gas libraries in the United States.
And many of us could not have done it without a place to go. This has been one of the best ones around, this Subsurface Library.
The founding duo saw the need for the creation of a geological data library open to all independent oil operators so they would have a chance against the bigger companies. At the time, there were no other such libraries here in the Permian Basin.
A lot of people don't realize the difference in the oil industry between working for a major and working for an independent.
The companies I work for were smaller companies, and not like majors. They didn't have the finances to have all the data that the majors would have in-house.
It really supported the independent side of the business. The majors had their own files. They had access to anything that they wanted. We independents, we didn't have that. We needed someplace where we could get all the information they could get, but we could get it cheaply.
We want to keep our companies alive during tough times. And I just think we are more invested in our little companies than a lot of the big majors.
Us independents need the wealth of information that's in this building to help us put together our deals and contribute to the economy here and the betterment of the city and the economy of the U.S.
This library moved into the basement in 1966 as it had run out of space in the Wilkinson Foster building. This was due to an abundance of independents flooding their small space. They eventually took over the entire basement of Western United Life in 1972.
Well, I think they both started way back in the 60s. And then as they started expanding, they were getting the collections from all the other companies, smaller companies that were getting rid of all their collections. So they needed a bigger place, my understanding was. And then that's when they decided to move into the Western United Life building.
Rousselot and Hughes made quite the impression on the oil and gas industry in the Permian Basin, including Rousselot's son.
Well, his background, he's a geologist, as was his father, as am I. So he knew the importance of having access to a database. And his partner King was a landman, and he also, they looked at it from different points of view, different parts of the industry, but still recognized the need for to serve the underserved small companies.
I want to take this opportunity to compliment King, Hughes, and Mr. Rousselot for having the foresight to start the library at a time when I can imagine how difficult it was to make that happen.
I remember when King, Hughes, and his wife were sorting scout cards on the floor of their apartment. But he had an idea, and it turned into a very invaluable asset for all of us.
Due to various factors, in 1997, the library had to move away from the Western United Life building.
We moved out of the building. Whenever it closed, the boiler went out, and they told us it was too expensive to fix it, and so we all moved out.
I mean, it takes a while to find a place. With all the weight of our files and whatnot, you pretty much have to be on ground level. You can't be on an upper floor just because of weight distribution just doesn't work. So, that limited a lot of places.
But it was kind of sad. It was kind of the end of an era.
End of one era, but the start of an even better one, as they built their own 18,000 square foot building a few blocks away on West Ohio Avenue.
Because when we were down there, we didn't know if it was raining, the sun was shining, and it was nice. It was nice.
Well, this is bigger and newer, more room. The other one had plenty of room. At the time, we all thought it was plenty big down there. But this is way bigger and more spread out and more roomy.
When this building was built, that was such an accomplishment because it's obvious we had room to take on a lot of other gifts that came in. It was going to be bigger and better. And we were all so very pleased that we were out of the basement and into the sunlight.
We were elbow to elbow down here. It was a pretty small space. The new building that King Hughes built and Dick Rousselot built 20 years ago was really a step up for them.
The space is bigger and better now, but the people who remember the basement will never forget the small space where the whole thing began. Small spaces bring people together even more, which is how the library in the Western United Life building turned from just a basement to a family.
Everybody's like family to me. All these guys, they're just like my dads, my grandpas, my brothers. But everybody was just so close, just like a family, and we all took care of each other.
At that time, downtown was busy, vibrant. I mean, that's where you made your connections, networked, that sort of thing. And there's many independents and small companies at Western United Life, many of which were members of Subsurface.
We all went to Subsurface 4, 5, 6 times a day to get data for our geologists and our engineers.
It was very convenient to go down. And it wasn't just about the database. You were, like I said, you were networking and meeting people.
Probably starting in 86 or 87 when I was a little older, I would go downtown and see my grandfather and my dad at their office, and they would go down to subsurface in the basement and look at logs and generate prospects, and I would play with my toy cars and superheroes out in the hallway.
It was unusual working at subsurface in the basement. It kind of felt funny, but it was a lot of fun. It was a little crowded. At that time, before the library moved to this building, it was very active. There were people use it, and you almost had to stand up to work. But it was enjoyable. If you wanted to meet somebody, have a meeting, go to subsurface.
Meeting the guys every day for you. And then multiple times a day some of the time. It was a place to meet your friends and visit for a while. And we did that quite a bit. You could always get good service. The girls were always helpful and polite and friendly.
It was just, you'd get on the elevator and you'd always see someone you knew. And then you'd come down here, and a lot of times they weren't working. They just walked down here to see who was here. And they're all still friends. Look at them.
Yeah, you knew you were going to find somebody you knew, and a lot of deals were, I think, instigated in subsurface.
It's just, we've just been through so much, so many things, all of us working together.
It's a little different now when you can do it on a computer. You can get the information, but you don't get the contact. And I think I kind of miss that.
Even though the library was underground, it's safe to say it was the talk of the building in each of the 14 stories above. At the end of the day, a building is a building, a setting. If the bones of this building could talk, it's safe to say there would be some great stories to tell. The real memories aren't entwined with the building itself, but the people you meet and the experiences you have along the way.
The nostalgia that I have, and it's not so much for the building, but it was, in a sense, I started my career here and didn't even know it. When I was 15 years old, I'd come downtown, go to the subsurface library, which was right below us, and pull logs and data from my dad, and that sparked something and I ended up getting a geology degree and being a geologist. I've spent my entire career here in Midland, which there's not many people that can say that didn't have to go do a tour of duty in Houston.
I originally got here 1978, worked in the building with GeoMap. Of course, it was a very well-kept, organized building, and it was a very busy, these corners here were very, very busy. So there was a lot of activity, and then of course with subsurface in the basement.
And we all taught each other, and I learned a lot. I'm still learning. My dad was in that building when he started working for Structure Maps. And I used to go there when I was in high school, walk over there, see him. And who'd have known that I was gonna be working in that building in the basement in 1984.
Just a group of guys that we had at GeoMap were outstanding. Mona's dad again, and then I worked in the reproduction area delivering those maps, and those guys were fun to work with. And then also getting to watch over the shoulders of the geologists that were also on staff and kind of pick up what they were doing and try to understand what they were doing.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. For this building, the beginning to that end started in 1996, and it's deteriorated since.
I hadn't been in this building. It's been closed for probably 15 years, I bet. I office right across from the park, and so I'm down here every day, and I park right around here every day. So unfortunately, I've watched it deteriorate slowly over the last few years.
Over the years, I've watched the building. I actually officed in the building next door, building in the southwest. Spent a lot of time walking this little sidewalk and walking the sidewalk going to Reynolds Brothers Reproduction. So I watched it over these years just kind of deteriorate, and we all wondered what was going to happen next.
Despite all the memories, most of these past building goers are ready to say goodbye to their old stomping ground.
I'm not one of these guys that thinks every old building ought to be knocked down. But when it gets in disrepair like this one has, I don't think any amount of money could save this thing.
It's been empty since we left it, so I understand, and it's difficult to go in and renovate an older building.
It's been a disaster waiting to happen for years, sitting up there, all the windows broken out of it and stuff, and it's time to do something with it. You know, it served its purpose. Move it out of the way and build something else.
Well, if it's not of any use and it's outdated enough to where it may be a little bit dangerous on the, let's just say on the elevators and things that need to be done, then it makes room for a new building or something else to be developed there.
You know, I think it's sad that it went into disrepair 5-10 years ago, but it's, to me, I don't know that you could ever refurb that building. It's probably full of asbestos. I think some things have a shelf life, and I think it reached its shelf life, or it expired.
It was a beautiful building in its day.
The architecture and the stone they used, this stone was all through the building. It was quite a building in its day.
No matter what gets put in its place, the tall city still has a tall future.
I will say this: I've spent my whole career here in Midland, and I've only worked in downtown as I had my office there for the last 3 years. I've always worked out in Cladesta, or I worked for 18 years for Henry Petroleum, which is now Henry Resources, and I'm right across from the new park. I'm in the Wall Towers West building. I'm really enjoying downtown, and it's being revitalized. I was against the park, and now I think it's a great, it draws a lot of people to downtown. I mean, parents come with their kids and play, and it's been a good thing.
It turned out very nice.
It did.
I just think downtown's got a really bright future as a commercial center. I don't think it's going away.
I think Midland has a bright future. I mean, we got young people. I think the average age is now like 32. So there's lots of exciting things coming to town. I think it's attracting people and attracting businesses, and the oil business is always going to be here. You know, we're right in the heart of it.
And I'm glad Next is here now for Midland, because it will only better downtown.
Midland's future is very bright.
Yeah, I don't think we're done. Not in my lifetime.
Midland isn't done, and while the tall city's future is as bright as it is tall, for every promising future, there's a positive past. And the Western United Life building sure was a cornerstone of that positive past with all the memories it created. These memories shaped who people were. The Western United Life building created a life for these people. Without the building and the subsurface library, Mona Kashaba wouldn't have had her family and career she has now. Edward Runyon wouldn't be inducted into the Petroleum Hall of Fame in 2023. And David Grace wouldn't have followed in his father's footsteps and made a name for himself in the oil industry. These 16 people wouldn't be having this reunion even after the building closed nearly 25 years ago. Who knows, maybe George W. Bush doesn't become president after being yelled at by Mr. Grace. However you think about it, the Western United Life building was different from most. It may not have been as towering as the Petroleum building, it may not have been as historical as the Scarborough Hotel, but it created memories that lasted a lifetime. It wasn't just a building in West Texas, it was a family. And maybe the second and third words in the building's name are the most important. United Life.